ever since I've been in Alabama, I felt like I'm the guy from Seattle. So I've always felt, even in recovery, that I'm the outsider. All that was playing up when my self-esteem was really low going into recovery. Immediately met this community. And what I found is, regardless of what was going on in my head, every time I fell on my face and relapsed or had to go back into a treatment center, they were there. This community, I don't care what they look like, what they do for a living, if we have nothing in common, they show up to help me. It even more reinforces that not just in recovery, but Alabama as a whole, no one looks at me as the Seattle guy and he's different.
Substance use disorder touches all our lives, and often we feel hopeless or frustrated in our pursuit to understand how and why it happens.
Welcome to APC Recovery Cafe, where we discuss the topics and trends around substance use, provide education and resources, offer recovery support, and also discuss prevention tactics, all through the stories of the people who have been there.
We invite you to grab your favorite coffee or tea and join us for a variety of guests that will bring understanding, information, connection, and hope.
Together, we can break the stigma and pave a brighter future for each other.
Hey folks, welcome into this edition of the APC Recovery Cafe. I'm Art Wimberly, a person grateful to be in long-term recovery and your co-host. And my co-host in the studio today is Edward Taylor, Director of Program Initiatives with APC. Hey, Edward.
Hey, how's it going, Art?
Going great.
Good to see you.
Would you like to introduce our special guest?
I would love to. Today we have Drew Callner, and I'm just going to introduce him as a friend of mine in recovery. I'm going to let him talk more about what he does and how he identifies professionally, I guess you could say.
So yeah, I am currently the owner and operator of Callner Creates, a full-scale video production company in Birmingham, Alabama. And yeah, we're ripping and rolling, pumping out videos every which way. Professionally, that's what I do.
This is the Recovery Cafe with APC. I've got a coffee from Seeds, and our guest also has something from Seeds. Drew, you want to tell us what you got
Sure,
there?
Yeah, I was a total diva, and I made Edward get me a latte with almond milk. If he had brought me dairy, I would have thrown it against the wall. But yeah, we love Seeds. We actually use this a lot in the film industry. Productions coming into town always need a coffee shop and need to fuel the crew, and we've always gone to Seeds.
Start back at the beginning. Tell us your story, how things were early and then how things got off track, and just kind of bring us through.
Okay. Just, for time's sake, I'll kind of keep it recovery focused. I went into high school very lost, searching for a group for men, everything. I felt very incomplete.
You had lost your dad.
Yeah,
early,
I'd lost
right?
my dad when I was 11, so middle school was just a complete wash of anxiety, uncertainty, feeling like totally left out. Had a rough middle school. And so I went into high school. Let's try this again. I got another fresh slate, 4 years. I walked in. Who were the popular kids I was normally attracted to right off the bat? Like, I'm going to be a part of that group. Middle school, I was on the outside, So this time, that is my goal. I'm going to find a group of friends. What are they doing? Started dressing like them, listening to their music. And it also helped that people in my neighborhood, the other guys I had known from middle school, were also gravitated towards that group. Well, that group was, smoking weed every day, drinking large amounts of alcohol at 14 and 15. Wow. Yeah. Everyone had fake IDs. It's weird now at 39 years old to think of what I see as a 16-year-old, which just looks like basically a stick figure kid to me now, looks tiny, and to think of that kid taking in copious amounts of alcohol and marijuana, and just living that lifestyle, partying, bad grades, really negative stuff with women and relationships. And so that just propelled me into college. where it just escalated into new drugs. And I tried cocaine, which is like something I thought I was just going to keep it alcohol and weed.
Yeah.
Keep it classy.
Keep it
Just
classy,
Like,
simple.
as if we could manage that. Right?
Totally. And I've kind of figured that, everyone's got a little of that in their story. I'm normal. But I wasn't using it normally, as I said. So came back and, now my, I guess my boundaries have been breached a little bit, personal boundaries, even though I was the one breaching them. And when I came back, I was like, well, if that got punctured, and that wasn't that bad, like I didn't die from it, So I came back and it just so happened that all my friends were selling Oxycontin.
Oh, yeah.
So this whole year that I was gone, or half a year, I came back and things had just escalated tremendously.
So that's around 20 years ago, roughly,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which is kind of what in this country now we refer to almost like second wave of opiate addiction, where it was coming back out into the culture again.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was I don't really even know how we viewed it. We knew it was cancer medication. We knew it was strong, but no one was ODing. There weren't stuff out about people ODing. And we knew, it's not something you go around talking to people about. But I think the difference in me and some of my friends that were taking it is it completed me.
Yeah.
They were taking it as marijuana or drinking. They could turn it on and off. I don't need it today. Well, I did it a couple days this day. I'm not that into it. I'll wait a couple weeks. Or they were just like, whenever it's around, I need it.
Gotcha.
Immediately from the first time I did it, it just completely completed me. I loved my personality on it. I loved my energy level. It was a part of me. So I chased that, let's just blast ahead 10, 15 years. I'm still very much chasing it. And everything I do in life is still incorporated. Went into the military, moved across the country, tried this job, this relationship, that relationship. All these new experiences, but that one pillar was still there. Oxycontin is still a part of my life.
Yeah.
So it just eventually, obviously, came into a lot of issues with it, from legal stuff to military legal stuff. Lost a lot of relationships, hurt a lot of people, and eventually found heroin. And when I found heroin, it wasn't by choice. I didn't, Oxycontin was still this kind of like, I guess, the classier of the opiates, and, heroin, I never had even thought much more about it. I just knew it was a dirty street drug, and I didn't want to be that, But eventually the dealers stopped having Oxycontin, and they started having heroin, and so it just was a natural transition.
I was nodding my head very vigorously when you described, feeling complete when you felt that opiate or the Oxycontin high for the first time. I'm not sure if you did opiates before that, but I mean, that was the way that I described it. Was like the first time I ever got high on opiates. I had always been yearning for something. It felt like everybody else was like experiencing life in a way that I just had to wait my turn for, or like I don't understand. And I was always searching and trying this drug and that. And I was like, not, it distracted me, but not really. That opiate high for the first time, I was like, that's the missing piece I've been looking for. This is how other people feel, surely, because everything is so easy for them. This is the best I've ever felt in my entire life.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. To answer your question, so Oxycontin was actually, I know a lot of people don't have that in their story, but it was the first opiate I ever tried, which is kind of a scary thing to think about, just to jump to, it's going like jumping past bronze, silver, all these other types of metals, and just experiencing gold for the first time.
Yeah.
It was.
Well,
that.
it's just a
So
pill.
that was my standard.
Well,
to
and
start.
my guess is, and we're scientifically and medically, we're more advanced than the 20, 15, 10 years ago. It's a pretty common thing now that we know that some people are just genetically not just predisposed to addictive behavior, but probably predisposed to where an opiate's going to hit the right receptors.
100%.
And it does feel like this is the way life was supposed to be, and then you began chasing that.
Right.
So eventually, you were not just using, but that career we were talking about that Edward referred to earlier was just even, did I sell you Roxy's, right? So eventually you became a dealer, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, just for the listeners, I wouldn't take the image of Scarface out of your mind for a second and just imagine like a broke Scarface, a broke wannabe Scarface. That would be it. So, a dealer who is addicted to the actual substance is never doing well, money wise or flashy or anything. He is using and he is selling to feed the beast. And so that's, I would, I guess, sell to buy more,
Yep.
and that started, with those Oxycontin guys, like they kind of branched out and allowed me to sell it as much as I was using it. So by the time I came to Alabama and refound Oxycontin, I didn't know about Roxycontin, and I guess the South had been hit with this wave of Roxycontin as well. And so the same thing happened. I was able to buy and make friends with the dealers and then sell it for them while using the whole time. Yeah.
And I know your mom wouldn't mind sharing this. She does it publicly, because there's always a family story tracking our addiction, right? Mm-hmm. Mine and yours. There's just going to be somebody, whether it's parents or spouses or loved ones or just friends. There's a story tracking it. And your mom had come into this place where she thought, okay, my son is helpless. He can't even tie his own shoes. And then she had to come to find out later, oh, no, he's actually pretty successful. He's running this little empire kind of going on the side, right?
Yeah, my mom is incredibly smart and incredibly in tune with her kids, but it just shows you the power of addiction. And I don't know, I'm not a parent myself, but when you tie, heart into it, if your kid is crying and desperate and this, of course you're going to help them. Well, an addict uses that as a weapon and constantly slashes this way, that way, paints a news story. Well, this is actually the problem. Well, I know I said that was a problem last week, but now this is the issue. And life is just always coming at you. The addict just can't ever get right. Just needs a little bit more help. This $100, this new opportunity, this gas card, whatever, mom, please, and I can't imagine from a mom's perspective how much strength it takes to finally turn that off. And she needed a lot of help to finally get there. Take in mind, she was a single parent.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a complication too. There,
she knew I
support.
had suffered just a lot of like masculine trauma of not growing up with my father. So we already had kind of issues there of, us finding our grounding. Like how does she discipline a son who's grown to be a big guy, and he's kind of all over the place, and he's intense, and he's very independent and has these wild friends. Like, how do I discipline that as a mom? Every time I do, he just flips out and runs out the door. I don't see him, So she'd been dealing with years and years and years of that. But she got to the point where and this is like, I'm talking decades of this. She finally got to the point where her delusions started to clear up a little bit. And she was like, okay, there's either two things going on here. Either he really is addicted, even though we've crossed that bridge many a times, and he says he's not, this and that, or there's something mentally wrong with him, because if I give him $600 for rent on a Monday, and on Wednesday he doesn't have the $600 and the rent isn't paid, what's going on? And so I think some other parents came in and kind of snapped her into some clarity there. But that was hard so she started thinking I might have mental issues, like not just with schooling, but like actual money management, life management. And then that became kind of easier to digest than this guy is taking copious amounts of cancer medication, So just Ed's laughing because he's got all this in his story too.
Absolutely. Just to be clear, like I'm not laughing at him, I'm laughing with him.
Yeah.
But I've never thought of it from the perspective of like maybe something's mentally wrong.
She says this.
I mean, something was, just like with me, but like I've never thought about that. Like, I just gave him, $400 yesterday, and why is he asking?
Right.
Well,
I can't
yeah,
imagine.
it's not an uncommon thing too in this sense. I mean, I'm both a recovering addict, but also the parent of 3 children that struggled significantly. I mean, deeply significantly, similar stories to what you got. And I look back in my journey and see how long I fooled myself about what was going on with them. And as a parent, I can testify, you're looking for any other excuse other than they're addicted to an opiate.
Yeah. And I was gonna say too. I mean, Drew mentioned, not being able to imagine how difficult it is from a parent's perspective, and having that strength to stop. I'm going to use the word enabling. I'm not saying that's what your mom was doing, but like stop enabling or stop, listening to all the BS basically that comes out. Yeah. I mean, that is something that like, I just, I've talked to people and I've talked to so many parents that reach out to me at APC or just somehow, some way they get a hold of me and I'm happy to talk to them. And my advice to them is always that very stern, kind of loving stern. I mean, just being stern, but also being like, let them know, like, hey, if you actually want to talk to me about what's going on, and want some help, I'll help you, but like real help, not money or whatever. But every time I say that, I'm just like, oh my God, I cannot imagine, cause I think about my parents and like, and it's like this. It's like both parties in that interaction have this conflict going on because like the parent, they cannot overcome their love for the child. And so that it's just like an instinct, like you said, like they're crying, they're hurting, you want to help and you can't turn that off, and the addict or the alcoholic, like they, at least from my perspective, I didn't want to do any of the manipulating I was doing, but I couldn't turn off my addiction.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like
which is, it's interesting. It kind of brings us to this inflection point that we probably need to talk about just a little bit in that either story, whether they're, I'm the struggling person with substance use disorder or I'm a loved one of them. Generally, you need community to get better, whether you're the parent or the spouse or the person struggling with addiction, right? Mm-hmm. You need community to get better. But no parent grows up, gets married, has children thinking, I'm going to need to be educated on exactly how to do this well, right? Yeah. The idea in a PAL group is, hey, I'll always love you, but the way I help has to change, and that's on me. And so community's huge, whether you're on either side of the equation. Does that make sense? Totally. Can you talk to us a little bit about where community began to come into play?
Yeah.
Or where it did make a difference for you?
Yeah, just as you were saying that, I was thinking, so it wasn't immediate, and I still felt, ever since I've been in Alabama, I felt like I'm the guy from Seattle. I guess I forgot to mention that. I'm from Seattle, lived there 21 years, and then moved here. But so I've always felt, even in recovery, that I'm the outsider, and I've kind of got to work harder to get friends here or whatever. So, all that was playing up when my self-esteem was really low going into recovery. So immediately met this community. And what I found is, regardless of what was going on in my head, every time I fell on my face and relapsed or had to go back into a treatment center, they were there. Yeah. So through action, regardless of what they were saying, it cut through what my head was telling me, because through action, if you keep showing up, now I trust you. Okay. And I trusted them. So that was like a huge point. This community, I don't care what they look like, what they do for a living, if we have nothing in common, they show up to help me. And so I just kind of morphed into that community. I was like, well, okay, I can be one of those people for someone else. But it was huge, and I never, I saw people at meetings like, laughing and hanging out, going to dinner afterwards, and I felt like, okay, that's just because, lots of them went to high school together. This is Birmingham, like smaller city, so they went to high school together, this and that, and they carry that into recovery. And then I felt like I would talk, and I didn't sound Southern, and this and that, so like, this is all going on in my head. None of this is true. They just wanted to love me. And so now that I've been here for a long time, it even more reinforces that not just in recovery, but Alabama as a whole, no one looks at me as the Seattle guy and he's different. Yeah. Like, it's just
that is a great point, though, because regardless of whether we feel like an insider or an outsider, the idea that I'm different, uniquely different, or terminally unique is the big one. Like you guys are either way worse than I am, I don't need to be here, or I'm so much worse, what you guys have won't help me, right? That's the problem, whether it's shame, guilt, outsider, insider, whatever, I'm different. We have to, that's a great point you made. You know what, no matter how I fell, if I came back, they said, glad you're here.
Right.
Right. Thanks for sharing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I have so much respect for people in the recovery community for literally just doing something as small as, hey, man, how's it going?
Yeah.
Hey, I saw you last Thursday. I like your shoes. It's small, tiny things that started to connect me and let me trust this community. Can I get you a coffee? Or, hey, just like a 2-second interaction before or after the meeting is so huge. You never know what someone's going through, obviously, but like that person could also be about to commit suicide. That person could also be about to drive to the ghetto and get a sack of dope and shoot up and die. And like, and they might look like they don't want to talk to you, but it's do it anyway. Yeah.
Let's take a minute or two, each of you in your own way, maybe share a little bit about that process in community, whether it's a particular 12-step or group or not is not necessarily that important, but beyond that original non-judgmental acceptance, what have you found in 12-step community or other recovery communities that have not only helped you to get stay sober, but then to begin to grow as well or mature?
Wow, that's a great question. I'll start by saying this. So I go to HA, Heroin Anonymous, and my first couple of times trying to get clean and sober, I thought, and to a certain extent this is true, don't get me wrong, but I thought just like a meeting was a meeting, whether it was this or that fellowship or that or that or that, and again there's some truth to that, absolutely, but I hadn't been to HA, and then a little funny side story that, I'm from Birmingham, but what you talked about, that anxiety of like, oh, this big crowd and they're all having so much fun. Like clearly this is a circle that I'm going to have to penetrate over time. Like I can't just step in, which is not the case at all. You literally can that's like one of the few places where the cool kids, for the most part, you can just walk right up and you're a cool kid all of a sudden and you don't have to get high or anything, Right. You're doing the opposite of that actually. So anyways, somebody, when I was in treatment for the first time, or the second time, I'm not sure, they were like, you should go to HA because like you're addicted to opiates and like that might, that might make sense for you. And the first time I went at that point in time, 2015, HA was like, wasn't new on the scene in Birmingham. It was the scene in a lot of ways. And it was packed. I mean, this tiny meeting place was packed and I didn't know a single person. I'm just deathly anxious and I walk in and I'm just wanting to back against the wall in the back and this chair opens up like in the middle and this guy's like, hey man, I don't, come sit down. I don't know you. I'm like, okay. And I sit down and the meeting hasn't started. He's like, so who are you? Where what's your name? And I was like, and I just got up and walked out. So anyways, the next time I tried HA, like I just kept going. But after my third time in treatment, when I was in sober living, we could only go to certain fellowships. And this is back to my point earlier where like any meeting, any fellowship, if they're applying the solution to the problem, I can go there and get what I need and I can give back. More importantly, I can give back. But when I went to HA for the first time that I was allowed to after I finished sober living, I stepped in and I'll never forget. I mean, I just felt at home, and I felt a meeting had barely even started. And I was like, there is something in here that is meant for me. This is the channel for me.
It's almost like I'm not saying it's the same thing. It's almost like what you're describing though is very parallel or very similar in kind to the feeling that the opiates produced when you
Sure.
originally took them.
Yeah.
I'm
Sure.
home. I'm home,
Sure.
but in a healthy way.
Sure.
I have a theory, and this has been developed over a lot of years of being in recovery, HA and other meetings as well. But I think there is a bond, not just from kind of the heroin culture, and we all liked Alice in Chains and Nirvana and that sort of stuff, but like the bond over the withdrawals and the withdrawal process, not minimizing any other withdrawal process, because I've had those too and they're equally as terrible. But there's something about the opiate withdrawal process that it's like the opiate users needed a place to come and be like, oh yeah, you had that. And, like to make a general statement like heroin addicts relapse more or die more or anything, there's some truth to it, but it's false too. You can't just make that blanket statement. That's just not true. Or they have worse stories or anything. But you can make a statement that they all can connect to each other over this tremendous mountain they had to climb to be able to even sit in the room like this.
Yep.
It's just no one gets off it easy.
Yep.
Ever.
Yep.
And that's what that makes me think of. And then I'll turn the floor over to Drew. But like, that was part of it too, it's not no type of, it's ultimately the same suffering. Mm-hmm. You just change the chemical basically, but so there's no better or worse type of, use disorder basically when it comes to substances, but it's the same reason why somebody who is going to a meeting for the first time, they're not and they're an alcoholic, they're probably not going to be at an HA meeting if they had a choice between that and AA. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when I went back to that HA meeting for the first time, I felt that, and then I heard all the shares, and I was like, every single person in this room has suffered not just from the same disease, but the exact same way that I did. He's talking about detoxing in jail. Oh my God, I've been there. I know exactly what that feels like. He's talking about this, that, or she's talking about that. And it just, and it was that moment where I felt my higher power talking to me like, this is, dude, this is where you need to be.
Maybe I'm not terminally unique.
Yeah.
Overall.
Yeah.
Maybe there is a solution.
Yeah.
And I'm actually seeing people make progress, which I remember my early recovery, the idea of, I kept being told, look, most of the time early, you're just borrowing somebody else's hope.
Yeah.
Right? You're just watching and listening, and you're borrowing their hope. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking, Heroin Anonymous uses the exact same literature as every AA meeting across the world, and so the only real difference are the stories and kind of energy sometimes you feel. Mm-hmm. This isn't every time. It's, once again, not a blanket statement, but there's something about that connection through the stories that will get people to at least show up the next time there's a meeting. And that's all it really takes. You start building momentum. Oh, I went to 3 this week. I went to 4. Now I recognize that dude that I think I sold Roxy's to. Like, I've seen him there 3 times. He looks like he's not squirming in his seat. Like, maybe if I keep coming, I can be more comfortable like him. So, I currently go to AA, and it was kind of a choice that I had to make later on, that like, oh, I can get solution all over. But HA was always super dear to my heart because that's the family that kind of took me in fresh off the streets, and I'm always completely loyal to them, always.
Yeah. One of the things that I admire about your story that you tell in various settings, some of them in meetings, some of them quite publicly, is, I've got a sobriety date, but let me tell you the deeper story about what sobriety has looked like for me. Even when you became quite public in the sense that, well, part of it was you were a videographer, right? And you were shooting a lot of footage to help recovery efforts, right? And so you became known, right? And so you got a story. And one of the traps of addiction and recovery is we can then fall in love with a different image about ourselves, right? Recovery man or whatever it is. And then, well, here's another egoic thing I got to get rid of, right? And you've been real honest about, it hadn't been a straight up journey, even from the most critical days of sobriety. There's been differences in different relapses, and I've had to learn what relapse looks like. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. when someone says they have 20 years sobriety, 10 years sobriety, you know, what you don't hear is all the struggles they had in those 10 or 20 years. And so this is just me. I wouldn't advise it. It's not taught in 12 steps. It's totally personal to me. But I stopped counting my sobriety dates because I was having so many relapses. And so 7 days, oops, I used again, shame. 30 days, whoops, I used again, shame. Now, times that by like 60, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to try something new. I'm not even going to remember the date. I've got today. And then that started turning into years. But in those years, there were a couple slip-ups with alcohol. And so I roughly know a date of heroin, and that's something that I'm really, really, really proud of. Because heroin represents all those decades of problems. And I say heroin, but it's heroin, Oxycontin, all that stuff.
Right.
Just pure carnage. But then there's been a couple slip-ups with alcohol that like 2 years in, slip-up, a year in, slip-up. Luckily, I haven't had that in a long time.
Yeah.
And through COVID, everything's been great, yada, yada. But in terms of like a hardcore date, that's been my approach. It's like, it's hard for me to think that because then I start championing myself. I've got 5 years. I'm better than the guy that's got 2 days shaking in his seat. And really, at the end of it, like my ego runs with everything. Yeah, but through the filmmaking process, like you said, it was kind of early in my recovery. And so I started being the observer rather than I'm actually the person with the issue too. Mm-hmm. And I started being the director of a subject rather than a participant in the subject. Yeah. Even when I was interviewing my mom, even if you watch the movie, you can see a hint of it. But when they interview me, I'm talking about it zoomed out, where in reality, I was very much still going to meetings, everything. But I'm saying, you know, a heroin addict, yada, yada, rather than me, I'm still dealing with it. And so. Well,
the big book says that we can get sobriety, which is good. But if we're not careful, we become a more clever version of our drunk self. Right? So now you're dealing with the different parts of
that's good.
personality.
Oh, man.
Okay, I want you two guys to address something. We're coming to the close.
Yeah.
But I would like to talk a little bit or see what get your take on this. What even with sobriety and building a new life, and each of you have done that and are doing that, what has been the role or the challenge with depression as you've gotten sober and stayed sober? How has that come in or not? Because that's usually a very big deal. It was in my life, in my recovery, and I've seen it with so many different people that recovery, no matter what the addiction was to. So if you're willing, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I very much, I'll be open about it. I still struggle. Not even close to the level of early recovery or anything, but I have waves. And it's almost seemed like, oh, he's clean and sober, his life should be. And some of this is a narrative I play in my head. No one's calling me every morning, you should be perfect. But in my own head, so I think I should be farther along. I think I should be ecstatic when I wake up. I have everything I prayed for. You know, like I put a lot of expectations on life. And I think I've had it my whole life, this feeling of inadequacy. I'm not quite there yet, all this stuff. Everyone else is there. But I definitely feel it in sobriety. I just know that tomorrow's a new day. And I've lived enough days in recovery to be like, okay, it's just a wave and I'm swimming and the undertow's ripping me right now. But you know what? In a couple of hours, if I just go to sleep, I wake up, it's always gone. And I'm still to this day, when I wake up and I'm out of the fire, let's say depression fire, I always wake up shocked, as if it was never going to go away. So the physical feeling is the same of addiction. This is never going away. I've sucked. Everyone else is happy. If I go to this meeting, what's the point? Because I feel bad. I'm going to feel bad afterwards. I'm just going to sit at home. And then the next day, I'm like, oh, I feel better, as if it's like this new concept.
Let's take a minute. I want you to tell folks more about Callner Productions and Callner Creations, what you're doing. Because it's not just about recovery issues. You do a lot of specialty stuff. And remind us of the name of your documentary, too, before we get off of here.
Yeah, so the name of the documentary that came out in 2017 is Recovering Hope, which at this point is all public domain on YouTube. So feel free to go there and check it out. Callner Creates right now is back to full scale running and gunning, from corporate videos, nonprofit videos, commercials, social media videos, and then all the while still having a kind of a thread of something a little deeper. Right now I'm working a lot with Alabama Veteran to tell deep stories of these combat vets and try to raise funding for their organization and just vets and suicide prevention in Alabama. At some point, that all kind of bleeds with addiction and stuff too. It's
so much
all
with PTSD and stress and mental health.
Yeah, it's all mental health. So that's what's going on right now. At COVID, we started a filmmaker group called We Are Filmmakers, and it was a bunch of displaced filmmakers. So we are a local community of probably about 20 filmmakers that are making films. That's going on. But yeah, right now, my company is up and running, and we are, we're going at it. We're open for business, so come check me out. Send me a message. Let's create.
Would you be willing to tell folks how they could get in touch with you, either from a recovery aspect or from the video aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, probably the easiest way would be just my personal Facebook, Drew Callner. I do have Callner Creates Facebook page, and you can message me on both of those. You can message me through the website, callnercreates.net. Or .net. Wait, yes, .net.
That's the way life used to be, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Or Instagram, Callner Creates. Right. You can message me on any of those, and you're messaging me directly, and I will get back to you 100%.
Guys, it's been wonderful. Folks, join us again next time for another edition of the APC Recovery Cafe. See you then.
One of the things that APC is known for is being a connector, because we're stronger together.
Not only are we there for those who are suffering through substance use disorder, but we're there for family members, and we really take our job seriously.
We all have personal reason why we're in this field. We're changing people's lives one community at a time.